close attention, okay? There's certainly steps that you have to memorize this process, okay? I have them typed out, and you'll know them, I think, by the time you finish practicing some of these. After we do some, then you're going to have a couple for your OTL, and then we're going to practice it again on Thursday. But this is going to be probably the most challenging one. I would say this is the one that if people are going to miss, they're going to miss, okay? Because there's lots of details that are important, okay? So, we're going to do something called completing the square. So there's a process, and you've got to follow the order that I have here, otherwise it doesn't work, okay? Most importantly, the coefficient of the x squared term, the squared term, has to be a 1. And that's the biggest mistake that people make. Unfortunately, look where it lies in your steps. It's the first step. So if you don't do that, there's like a big X on your paper and minus 12 points. I mean, you have to do that. I mean, that's step 1. Coefficient must be 1, okay? Then you're going to move the constant term to the right side of equals. Then we're going to take half of the middle coefficient, square it, and add it to both sides of the equation. Because you got to keep the equation balanced. So what you do to one, you do to the other. Okay? I'm going to write that out as I do it, but some of you, as you do these, you'll pick it up quickly. You won't have to write it. You'll just do it. Okay? Then you're going to factor on the left side, because we'll have a factorable trinomial, and then you're going to add on the right side. Then you're going to write the left side as a quantity squared, and then we're going to apply the square root method, which we just did. Square root both sides of the equation. Don't forget plus minus, and then get your epsilon. Okay? Are you ready? Okay, here we go. Coefficient of the x squared term must be 1. It is. Move the constant term to the right side of the equal sign. So that means move that 8 over. So we're going to subtract it. When you do that, leave a little space after that linear term, after the x term. Then we're going to take, we're going to take half of the middle coefficient squared. We're going to take half of the middle coefficient squared. So I'm going to have negative 3 squared, which is 9. Now again, I'm going to be writing that as we do them today, but certainly half of 6 is 3 squared is 9. That's doable in your head. You don't have to write it out, okay? And then add that to both sides of the equation. Again, to keep it balanced. Then, on the left side, you get a trinomial that is factorable, okay? So we factor it. So x times x, positive last term means same sign, look in the middle, so minus minus. 9 is going to be 3 times 3. You're always going to choose the square, because that's why we're completing the square. It's always going to be a perfect square. So when you go to pick the factors for 9, they're going to be the same factors, okay? Whether it's 9, 16, 25, 36, whatever number, it's always going to be a square that you're putting there, okay? And then add on the right side, so positive 1. X minus 3 times x minus 3 can be written as x minus 3 squared. So we're writing the left side as a quantity squared equals 1. And then it looks like the problems you just did. Square root both sides. Apply the square root method. So x minus 3 equals plus minus 1. Get x alone by adding 3 to both sides. So 3 plus minus 1. And then that can go further because we don't have a radical. So 3 plus 1 is 4. 3 minus 1 is 2. Okay, a question about that so far? couple things I want to point out. Here and here, where you factor and then write it as a quantity squared, once you get to know these well enough, I don't care if you skip the step where you factor and then write it as a quantity squared, because they're always going to be the same. Always. That's why it's called completing the square. You're making the square. You'll also notice that this half, before I squared it, is always what's going to be right here also. So when I take half the middle term, before I square it, that's what's going to be placed right there. It's going to be x minus 3. Okay? So as you work through these and you get better at them, there's certainly some things you might shorten up for yourself, which I don't have a problem with. Okay? Okay, next question. Coefficient of the x squared term must be 1. It's not. So we're going to divide the whole equation by 5. So I get x squared minus 4x equals 2. And then I'm going to take half of the middle coefficient and square it. So I'm going to have half of negative 4 is negative 2 squared. Typically when I do this, I ignore the positive or the negative, and I just always make it positive, because when I square it, it's going to become positive. So when I mentally am saying it to myself, I'm just going half of 4 is 2 squared is 4. So then I'm going to add that to both sides. I'm not going to skip any steps as I'm doing these today, but certainly, as I said, if you can, go ahead. Okay, so we're going to factor on the left now. X times x, minus and a minus, and then 4 is 2 times 2. Add on the right, positive 6. Write the left side as a quantity squared. Square root both sides. The square root of x minus 2 squared is x minus 2. The square root of 6 we don't know. Plus minus though. And then move your 2 over. Add 2, put that in front of the plus minus. And you could check this. I mean, you could literally go to your calculator and punch in 5 parentheses 2 plus the square root of 6, close parentheses, squared, minus 20, parentheses, 2 plus square root of 6. Enter. Does that equal 10? And you can check the answer. You can know if you're right. You can pretty easily check that on your calculator. Okay, a question? Okay, my next one here. Coefficient of the x squared term must be 1. Done. Move the constant term to the right side. Add the 23. Minus, add it to both sides, positive. Then take half of the middle coefficient and square it. Anytime you take half of an even number, that's very simple. Divide it by 2. Anytime you take half of an odd number, it's just that number over 2. Half of 5 is 5 over 2. Half of 7 is 7 over 2. Half of 11 is 11 over 2. So half of a negative 5 is a negative 5 over 2. Squared is 25/4. Do not use decimals. Do not use decimals. Leave everything as fractions. Okay? Add to both sides. So half of the middle coefficient, square it, add to both sides. We go to factor. Now, why that looks a little complicated to factor, it's not as complicated as you think. So I'm going to have x times x. I'm going to have they're not all minuses. Some of them are plus. I'm going to do a plus and make sure there. And then when you're figuring out what goes here, just square root that. It's 5/2. And again, I'll show you that they match. Minus 5/2, minus 5/2. They match each other. It's always going to happen. Add on the right. 23 times 4 is 20, 40, 60, 80, 92, 102, 112, 117 over 4. I don't know. Somebody check. Did anybody add that already and get that? Yeah, thank you. Okay, 117 over 4. Remember how to put that in your calculators because you're going to have fraction questions. If you don't know how to put in your calculator, let's make sure we get those questions answered today. 23 plus 25 fourths, and then make sure you leave it as a fraction. Okay? Write the left side as a quantity squared. And then square root both sides. I don't think 117 has a square, but just let me check something real quick. Oh my gosh, it does. As I said, I just happened 9 times 13. Somebody make a little note of that. And I just didn't know that. I really didn't think it had one, but I just went and checked. And it does. So the square root of 117 goes to 9 times 13, or 3 square root 13. The square root of 4 is 2. The denominator will always have a perfect square. Plus minus. And then bring your 5/2 over. Add it. And then you don't need to go any further, but you could write it as one fraction if you felt compelled to do that. They're equal statements or equivalent statements. They should have the same denominator. I really don't have a preference which way it's written. Some people like this way because when we do the quadratic formula on Thursday, the answers end up looking like this. Like if we did this same question with the quadratic formula, it ends up looking like this side instead of 2 fractions. They're the same thing. I don't really care. Either way. Okay, that one was a little trickier because we had an odd middle coefficient. So, a question on that one. If you're not sure about the calculator thing, I can go over that with you individually when we're finished here, okay? Did I not? Oh, I did. Here it is, right here. I'm making sure I gave you one of these. Okay, so step 1, coefficient of the x squared term must be 1, so divide everything by 3. So I have x squared plus 4/3 x minus 1/3 equals 0. Move the constant term to the right. X squared plus 4/3 x. So add that equals 1/3. Move that over. Then we're going to take half of the middle coefficient and square it. Half of 4/3 is 2/3. You can punch in your calculator if you're not sure. 1/2 times 4/3. I just did it in my head. So mentally I just took this 2 canceled and went into 4 twice. And I took 2 times 1 and 1 times 3. Or actually, half of 4/3 is 2/3. Square it, and I have 4/9. So half of 4/3 is 2/3.